If you're a liberal who's confused about why leftists keep getting mad at you when you're just doing your best, this video is for you because as a political philosopher, I'm going to break down some of the contradictions between liberalism and leftism. Specifically, I'm going to answer this question, which is about whether or not you can participate in the system while still thinking that it has a lot of problems. Try to make it better from within. The short answer is it really depends on what exactly you think those problems are, and that is going to be different based on if you're a liberal or a leftist. So the first thing I think it's important to say is that liberalism is the dominant system in the West. In America, classical liberalism is the foundation for the kind of government that we have. Now, classical liberalism is not necessarily the same thing as when we talk about liberal Democrats, but of course there's a lot of similarities, and I'll probably make a video about that later. So classical liberals believe in a few key tenets, including the idea that individual liberty is the highest value, which means that what the government's role is to protect the rights of individuals against harm from others, or from the government, i.e. tyranny. If you're an American, you probably have some version of this view. It's just very common. Whether you're Democrat, Republican, a lot of people think some version of this. But liberalism is more than just that, because it also entails a belief in the importance of free markets, and typically also private property. That is a view that you're going to see in someone like Locke, who is considered the father of modern liberalism. In today's day and age, if you are a liberal, you believe in some kind of capitalism, which is to say you don't have an interest in ending capitalism. Now, if you're a leftist or a radical, you're going to have problems with some or all of these parts of liberalism. Particularly leftists are going to have a problem with capitalism, which is why a lot of people will say leftism begins with anti-capitalism. Okay, so now that we know what liberalism is, let's actually try to answer this question from the perspective of a liberal and the perspective of a leftist. If you're engaging in actions that support sustaining capitalism, then you're not a leftist. Now, a liberal can still believe that there are a lot of problems with capitalism and with the system in general. In America, we might call those people progressives or social democrats. And those people tend to be interested in stronger government regulation over major companies, such as things like antitrust or anti-monopoly policies. Now, those are economic examples. There are a lot of other examples too. But the thing about these policies is that even though they are about making capitalism more humane, they are still interested in sustaining the free markets of capitalism. So those people are still considered liberals. They're further left than someone who does not want to do those policies, but they are still liberals. If you consider yourself to be a very progressive person, but you're not a leftist, you probably agree with the set of policies I've just described. But a leftist is going to tell you that's not actually enough. And some people call this purity testing, but that's not always the case. It's really more just that it's a different starting point for thinking about how politics should work. And you have to understand that if you're a leftist, you see capitalism and liberalism in generally as the problem. For example, the liberals were actually crucial in Germany in the rise of fascism. Liberals sometimes say that leftists have expectations that are too high or that they are too extreme and unrealistic. But again, it's a different starting point because a leftist doesn't want to see the current system sustain itself at all. So a leftist and a liberal are going to diagnose the problem differently, and that's why their answers to this question will be different. Do you think that capitalism in general is the problem? Then you're a leftist. But do you think unregulated capitalism is the problem, but capitalism in general can be okay? Then you're probably more like a social democrat, which again means that you're a liberal. I think some of the original frustration with the comments about the rule of law and the possibility of canceling elections is that a lot of leftists are going to see liberalism as aiding and abetting the rise of fascism. So I would say there are some leftists who will do things like participate in electoralism. They'll vote for candidates who are considered liberal. Some leftists won't. It just depends. So I think that would be an example of the kind of person you're talking about, where they think the system in general is flawed, but they're still going to do certain things to participate in the system. But I also think even that gets really complicated because if you ask leftists from the recent election cycle, they're going to tell you that there were no good mainstream candidates to vote for because they all supported the thing that I can't say on this website. So then in that case, a leftist and a liberal would still be butting heads on the issue because a liberal might see voting as harm reduction, that they still want to participate in the system and allow it to sustain itself because they think it's a little bit less bad than the alternative. But a leftist is going to tell you that that just prolongs the suffering. It makes things worse. It makes things harder to fix. Because at the end of the day, a leftist that is an anti-capitalist is going to tell you that the problem is capitalism, that capitalism reproduces crises domestically and internationally constantly. And there's a lot of reasons for why leftists think that, and if you were curious, maybe I'll make a video about it. But also, I would recommend just go reading some books. So I think the short answer to the question is this. If you think there's significant problems with the system, you probably can still participate in it without much contradiction in your worldview if you're a social democrat, that is, if you're a liberal. But if the question is, can you participate in the system if you think there's fundamental problems with it? Not significant, but fundamental problems, like you're an anti-capitalist and you're a leftist. It's going to be very hard in 95% of cases to do so without significant contradictions in one's worldview. And to the extent that you do participate in the system, the reasons you're participating are going to be very different than the reasons why liberals are participating.